Welcome to the Coffee with Karen podcast, a weekly chat show discussing everything from holistic health to current affairs from a mental, physical and spiritual perspective. Get your weekly cup of positivity with a sprinkling of woo-woo.
So welcome to a Coffee with Karen, a cup of positivity with just a sprinkling of woo-woo. So I'm your host, Karen Roberts. I focus on helping women who have maybe lost their mojo a little bit feel good about themselves again. So if you want to check me out, just go to KarenRobertsCoaching.com. But today's show is all about the extraversion bias. What is that? So my guest today, Joanna, I wonder whether you could introduce yourself to the viewer, to the listeners. Well, some will be viewers, some will be just listeners. Tell us a little bit about who you are, what you do, and share a little bit of your story.
Perfect. So thanks for inviting me firstly. So it's a real pleasure to be here. I'm Jo, and I'm an introvert. I identify as an introvert. And, you know, there are so many myths and misconceptions about what that means, and I can explain a little bit about that. But the reality is that we live in a world that's biased towards extroverts. So it's biased to those who push themselves forward, who speak up, who kind of go me, me, me. And the quieter ones amongst us, the ones for whom actually we're already overstimulated mentally and are trying to hang on to that little bit of battery charge we have in order to do our best work or be our best selves, means that, you know, the world isn't our friend a lot of the time because it expects us to be something else. It expects us to be different. So as a child, I knew I was different. I used to take myself to bed early to read because I thought it was a real treat to escape from the kind of, you know, the busyness of family life and just take myself off into a fantasy world. And I could hear other kids, like, you know, where are we? We're June. We've got those lovely long light evenings at the moment. I could hear kids outside playing, but I was already tucked up in my bed reading. And it was one of those things that I knew I was different. I didn't know how or why. I used to get the mickey taken out of me quite a lot. People would, as I got older, would call me stuck up and snobbish and arrogant and all sorts of horrid things, actually. And it wasn't until I was in my 30s that I realized how I was different. And what made me different is that I identified as an introvert in a world that kind of doesn't seem to value that. So I then spent a couple of decades trying to be even more extroverted, because now I understood what made me different. I looked around at all my peers and colleagues, and they were all the big character kind of people. And I thought, well, obviously I've got to be like them if I'm going to be successful, and ultimately reached burnout. So I knew there had to be a different way, a better way of doing things. And that's where I finally got to.
Wow. So really, do you think that we live in a world of extroverts?
Certainly a world biased towards extroverts. If we look at pure numbers, it's pretty evenly split. So, you know, most of the research will say there are as many people who identify as introverts as extroverts. Yet everything, you know, every recruitment process, every interview process, every assessment, every promotion, every sports club, every gym, every club is all schools, is all geared up to, you've got to speak up, you've got to push yourself forward, you've got to work in teams, you've got to do this, you know, you've got to be extroverted.
Yes, okay, I hear you. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, you do feel like, yeah, you have got to be the one that's got to push, and that's not going to be suited for everyone, is it?
No. So what happens in the workplace especially is that introverts tend to get overlooked. So assumptions will be made about how they're not ambitious, they're not maybe aren't prepared to get out of their comfort zone, that they aren't confident, all sorts of things, none of which is true, but it's just that we're wired differently. So from a neurodiversity perspective, you know, the brains of introverts and extroverts are wired differently. So it's not like it's a choice that we have. We're just wired differently. And more organizations and I guess more people in society would do well to understand that it's a wiring difference. So we're not weird, we're just wired differently.
And do you think that is something that, you know, are a lot of these big companies, are they aware of the differences?
No, not enough, in my opinion. So since '94, I've worked as a trainer, coach, and facilitator. I run my own business, working with corporates, you know, across the globe. And it was only probably 4 or 5 years ago that I finally got mad enough at seeing so many people like me who were being overlooked, who weren't being recognized for their great work. And I finally thought, well, something has to change. And if not me, then who? If not now, then when? So I decided actually that somebody had to start speaking up and rattling cages. And that's when Flourishing Introverts was born. So I founded Flourishing Introverts, to be an advocate of introverts and say, you know, look at us. It's not that we're stuck up, boring, arrogant, lacking ambition. We're just different. And so I work with introverts at an individual and a group level, but I also work with organizations, helping them see where the bias exists in their everyday practices and processes. Because, you know, any organization worth its salt these days will have a diversity, equity, and inclusion policy. But unless it includes this aspect of neurodiversity, it's not a sound policy.
Fair enough. And do you think it's something then that's not necessarily deliberately overlooked? It's just that a lot of people possibly aren't aware of it. I, for one, definitely, this is the first time I've actually heard about it. And number two, I didn't realise there was the wiring was different. I would say I have one daughter who's an extrovert and one daughter who's, I would say, more introvert. And you just guess that they're just different, and that's her way and that's her way. And it's good for both of them, right?
It is, absolutely. So it's great that you are valuing their difference, that you can see that actually what they have is their own strengths that they bring to a situation. Unfortunately, I also talk to a lot of families where the quieter child is the one who's always then said, come on, you've got to be more like the other child. You've got to push yourself forward. You've got to speak up. Why don't you invite friends over? Why don't you do this? Why don't you do that? Why are you reading so much? And actually, I love the fact that, you know, you've got both an introvert and an extrovert child, and you just appreciate their difference. That's wonderful to hear.
Well, it is. It's actually also interesting that I would actually be more concerned about the elder extrovert one. And it was actually my partner that said to me, because I would always say my younger one, she's very studious. She just goes in and does, she always does well. And I didn't feel that I had to worry about her as much.
Right.
And actually was brought to my attention by my partner to say, right, hang on a minute. You know, this one's getting all the attention. You've got actually not quite so sure that, you know, my faith in her being absolutely perfectly fine.
Yeah.
It wasn't 100%. So I had to be careful in what then I was saying.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, because quite often the more extroverted child will get praised for what they're doing. And, you know, and if they're achieving great things, if they're... I've got a lot of feedback now. Okay, that's better. If they're achieving great things, then, you know, they'll get a lot of positive feedback. They'll get encouraged by extended family members as well. Whereas the introverted child will often be left to their own devices because they're no problem. So I think your partner is onto something here. But when the attention goes towards the introverted child, it's not about encouraging them to be more extroverted, but praising them for being studious, for being hardworking, for being kind, for being thoughtful, whatever it is they happen to be. So that they're getting as much praise as the one who's more extroverted, but for their own qualities and strengths.
Yeah, I can. Yeah, and I totally can see that. And it was something. So yeah, without knowing Lee, I have been put against it, but from a position of I didn't think I needed to. Thought she was absolutely fine and doing great, and actually, no, it wasn't 100% true.
Yeah.
So, where does this? I mean, explain a little bit. What is this? What's the extraversion bias? What does this mean?
If we go back and actually look at what makes us different. So I go back to Jungian psychology. I'm a big fan of Jung. I'm not a Freudian, I'm a Jungian. And Carl Jung explained it as being that the introverts are already overstimulated mentally. So one of the reasons that we'll go inwards, and it's intro, so turning inwards, and extra, turning outwards. One of the reasons that introverts will turn inwards is because they're overstimulated mentally, they can get overwhelmed by additional mental stimulation. So being in at a busy party, being in a shopping mall, being somewhere where it's really noisy can literally tip an introvert into overwhelm. On the other hand, the extroverts need that external stimulation in order to recharge their mental batteries. So they need social interaction, they need active experiences, they need change in order to feel alive, to be fully recharged. So what drains the batteries of one recharges the batteries of another. So immediately there we have a point of tension in that often the extroverts can't understand why an introvert is happy being on their own. Do you know the question most introverts hate on a Monday morning if they go into the office is somebody saying, "What did you do at the weekend?" Because for most introverts, it will be absolutely nothing, and it was joyful. I had a lie-in, I had a lazy breakfast, I did this, all of which is going to be solo, calm, quiet type activities that are going to give them a chance to recharge for the week ahead. Whereas an extrovert, especially during lockdown, couldn't wait to get out and go to the park and see people and go for dinner and do this and do that. Introverts don't need that. That's the very thing that overwhelms them. So that's why we can talk about this extraversion bias, because that behavior is deemed as the norm. So it's, we think that's healthy for people to want to go out and socialize. And yes, we know that people as humans, we need connection, but introverts need different type of human connection. So we need quiet. My husband and I will often spend hours in what we refer to as companionable silence. An hour or two will go by and we hardly say anything to each other, but we're very happy in each other's company. We don't need to be talking all the time. Whereas an extrovert, imagine an extrovert in a library, that would drive them crackers. Sometimes when we go out to dinner, I see people looking across at us because we'll maybe be, eating our dinner, not talking very much. And you can almost see pitying looks from people going, "Oh, look at those two old people. They got nothing to say to each other." And yet we are having just an amazing time. We're enjoying the food. We might talk a little about things, but what we don't do very well is small talk. So, networking events can be a bit daunting for an introvert, where we're just expected to rock up and start talking about nothing in particular. What introverts are really good at is the kind of deep and meaningful, the generative conversations that expand our thinking, that get us onto a different level. So that's why we're often seen as antisocial or boring, because we don't do the kind of, "How was your weekend? What did you do? Where did you?" It's just not us.
Right. And that is actually that core. I've learned a lot in just 10 minutes, because yes, I have been worried about my younger one because she will be in here on her own, especially obviously throughout lockdown. And you're so right. I mean, that's, yeah, me to a T. I've been, lockdown has not been a good thing for me.
Yeah.
She's been, but I worry, then I'm concerned because I think, oh, that's not healthy. But yeah, there you go. Well, that actually puts my mind at rest a little bit more.
Yeah, good.
Because I have been concerned, but that is how she is. That is how she is.
Absolutely. And, you know, I would ask her what she's really enjoyed about, you know, maybe being in lockdown, maybe not having the expectation of getting out and socializing. What has she enjoyed about that? Because that will start to open up more about what she really wants to do and what really helps her feel good about herself too.
There you go. Wow. Yes, that is a complete blast of something completely new.
Yeah. The other thing we find about introverts and extroverts is that our communication process is different. So an extrovert has what we refer to as a say, think, say communication process. You ask an extrovert a question, they'll give you an answer off the top of their head. They may not mean it. They won't have thought it through. They may not even remember what they said a little while later because they just gave an answer.
You mind reading.
Whereas, and so as a result, they're not particularly attached to anything they've said because it was off the cuff. They didn't really mean it. They didn't really even think about it. Whereas an introvert's communication process is think, say, think. So when we get asked a question, we actually then will spend time reflecting and thinking about what's the real answer for us. What do we really want to say in this moment? So by the time we say it, we mean it. And therefore, we don't say sorry as often because we don't need to, because we've meant everything we've said. Even though it might be harsh, we've still meant what we've said. But again, in this world that expects immediate responses from people, somebody who doesn't give you an immediate answer, we then kind of decide, oh, well, they haven't got an opinion or they don't know the answer to something. No, it's that actually we need to understand that their communication process, we need to give them time and space to think. So I remember being a delegate on somebody's course and he asked me a question and I did my normal think, say, think. So he asked me the question. I kind of sat there pondering, thinking about what the answer might be. He moved off and asked the question of somebody else, never came back to me to find out what my answer was. And then at the end of the course, I got given feedback from him that I lacked confidence and needed to speak up more. Well, neither of those things is true, but it was him not understanding my communication process. So the other thing that you can really do thoughtfully and helpfully for your introverted daughter is to give her space to think about her answers, not push her for an immediate decision, not push her for an immediate answer. So it might even be, you know, we're going to think about what to do next weekend. So give it some thought and then we'll catch up tomorrow and talk about it. Brilliant, because it gives the introverts time to get clear in their own mind what it is they want to do or what they want to say.
Wow, that really, that's stumped me. She is so like that. And interestingly, actually, I do, again, I feel like I know I've done the right thing throughout lockdown because of the way the schools are and everything. And she is quieter and she can't wear a mask because she struggles with asthma. So the whole journey too, because I said, no, you wear this. But obviously she doesn't want confrontation. So the whole journey to and from school was a drama. And she was going to a new sixth form anyway, so she didn't know anybody. So and then like you just said, the teacher would be on her case if she hasn't spoken up, making her feel really. So actually we've deregistered enough. She's got a private tutor at home and she's flourishing. Her teacher She's so thrilled with her. She's getting all her work done. I think she's going to do incredibly well in her A-levels. And again, I did think it was the right thing for her at this time with the state of everything, but that has just sort of reinforced more reasons as to why that would fit with her. Yeah, she's not the one to, the teacher puts her on the spot in front of everybody or even on a Zoom. And she needs time. That's just, I've never, ever heard of this. And why is this the first time I'm hearing about it? What's going on?
Well, it is interesting, and it's a question I ponder quite often, is who decided that extroversion was the norm and that we were the neurodivergent ones? Why isn't it that we're the normal ones and it's the extroverts who are the neurodivergent? So there's something odd going on, and it's been like it for a while, and it starts early on. So it starts often preschool, but certainly in early years education. We'll worry about the child who likes to sit and read or play quietly on their own and think, no, you've got to go and run around with so-and-so. You've got to go and do something. And so right from an early age, we're teaching introverts that it's not okay for you to be how you are. You've got to be somebody else. So by the time introverts get to late teenage, early 20s, many of us have this thing of we're not enough. We're not enough how we are because we've had years or decades of being told, be different, behave differently, speak up, do this, do that. So by then, it can, for some, create a kind of low self-confidence, low self-esteem. For some, they develop social anxiety. Now, social anxiety and introversion are not the same thing. I know extroverts.
One cause.
So it's not even that one can cause, but actually having years of being told you must be different can kind of trigger in a way. But I know extroverts who have social anxiety. Can you imagine how difficult that is? They need social interaction in order to recharge their batteries. And yet they're out there fearing judgment and worried about what people are saying and thinking and hating every moment of it. The reality is that most introverts don't have social anxiety. But interestingly, many introverts are empaths. So back to your coffee and a little bit of woo-woo. Many introverts actually do have that ability to take on and read other people's emotions, which can make us quite sensitive. So it wouldn't surprise me if your daughter, your youngest daughter, then also was a bit of an empath. And one of the reasons then that we get overwhelmed is because we physically feel the emotion that's in a room. We can read it, we can feel it, we can, almost touch it. And it can be really overwhelming for us.
Right. And so do you think that Maureen tuned into the little bit of woo-woo? Yes, definitely she is.
I absolutely do. Yeah, I absolutely do. And it's not to say, we can't make grand sweeping judgments about, extroverts aren't woo-woo, but more introverts, it's shown, are empaths, are highly sensitive, so are HSPs. So those two will often go hand in hand.
Right. And I suppose, now why would that be? As in, okay, so my thought process now is going, well, I would say I'm an extrovert, and I know that I need downtime, and so I do meditate to focus on, to try and make me go a bit more in, right? So I suppose if you're naturally like that, you're possibly more naturally accustomed to calming the mind, to be more in tune with the little bit of woo-woo that's going on.
Yeah. And, because of the pressure from us or on us from society, we too need to meditate in order just to ground ourselves again, in order just to recharge those batteries that are otherwise draining so fast. So I'll often talk about, it's like extroverts have a solar panel, and every time they're out in busyness, their battery's being topped up, a bit like a solar panel draws energy from the sun or creates energy from the sun. So an extrovert will create or draw energy just from people and busyness and interactions. Whereas for an introvert, it's a bit like plugging yourself in quietly to a socket in the corner of the room. So an introvert will be very conscious of their, I'll pause for a moment because there's a plane going over and I don't know if you can hear it.
I can't hear it.
I plugged my microphone in through Crisp, but I don't know if it actually took it out or not. Whereas an introvert is much more likely to almost be the one that quietly takes themselves off to the corner of the room, plugs themselves into a socket, and a bit like for your phone, you'll keep it plugged in until it's topped up. And introverts are very aware of their mental batteries, so they'll feel the battery draining, and that's when we'll either check out physically or mentally. So we'll kind of go, lights are on, no one's in, and it's because what we've done is we've checked out because we're having to do a little moment of recharge. So does your daughter do that?
Oh my good, honestly, I'm trying to think what she says to her. Because it's like if she's watching a film or something, you just can't, like, it would only take a second and I'll be distracted. Whereas,
yeah,
it's just like when she zones in, like if she zones in and she's looking on her phone, you could say, Danielle, she just hasn't heard you. She's just not.
Yeah.
And she has even mentioned something you said, can't think what you just mentioned there about your social battery. Yeah, she can only take so much.
Yeah,
but I've just never heard it explained in this way, but it's just so interesting.
You'll often hear introverts say, I'm all peopled out, or I've had enough peopling for today. And that's a clear sign that actually I'm in overwhelm, or I've gone past overwhelm. So I noticed that there's a particular process, and the first thing is overwhelm. So when introverts' battery is draining, we get into overwhelm fairly quickly. And I have a kind of set of techniques I use called my brilliant battery boosters. And like for your mobile phone, you get that little battery that gives you an extra hour of juice, that emergency battery. So my brilliant battery boosters are like that. They're little techniques I use that can immediately just help top up my battery just to keep me going. So if I'm in a client meeting or if I'm delivering training and I've just got to keep going, then I'll use one of these little techniques. And it can be a quick meditation. It can be using aromas, so things like lemon oil, that's really good at kind of helping with focus and concentration. I've got crystals that I'll have with me, so it might just be that I'll spend a bit of time just kind of with the crystal. Or just movement, just walking around up and down stairs. If I'm on my own, I'll have a quick dance break. But if I'm in a client's site, I'll just walk around or up and down stairs, and that's enough just to help me change state. But if we don't top our batteries up once we reach overwhelm, we go into introvert hangover. And that's like the worst hangover you've ever had, but we didn't get the benefit of the alcohol. It's a real killer. And it's the time when only a duvet day will do. Nothing else will bring us out. Our batteries are so depleted that actually what we need to do is just check out for 24 hours. If we don't do that often enough, we can get into introvert burnout. And I've only been there a couple of times in my life, but the one time it took me 3 months to get over it. And it's when I left one of my, I was an associate trainer for a big international organization, and I left working with them because I knew I just couldn't do it anymore. And I went home and I stared at my computer for 3 months thinking, well, I ought to be doing something now, but I couldn't actually focus and do any work. You talk about Danielle really being able to focus. I didn't have enough charge in my mental battery to focus on anything. And it wasn't until January till I thought, holy crap, I've got a tax bill to pay. I better find a source of income, because by then I'd not been earning for 3 months. That all of a sudden it kind of, I had to come out of it. But it was a horrible situation. So one of the things I'd also say with Danielle is make sure that she's getting plenty of time to rest and recharge, because otherwise she'll be on that slippery slope to hangover and then burnout, which isn't fun at all.
Right. Well, I have to say that definitely throughout lockdown, she's definitely had enough. And in a way, that's possibly one of the reasons why I've even totally allowed it. I think outside of lockdown, I might have been more pushy to get her out. But because of the way things have been, it's been a bit like, well, she's got nothing to get up for. Let her stay in bed, sort of thing.
Yeah.
So yes, it's really interesting how that has all come about. I mean, it's using the words introvert and extrovert. I suppose I probably didn't put those labels on. Just she's just more quiet and just gets on with stuff, and she's the other one's a bit more like me, but. There's no vital, I would like to be more like Danielle is.
Yeah, and people will often say, oh, I don't like labels. Labels aren't useful or helpful. But I look at it in terms of its useful categorization. And I can't remember if it was Peter Farb, the social anthropologist, who talked about how, as very young people, actually, we learn through useful categorization what's safe, what's not safe, what's hot, what's not hot, what's dangerous, all that sort of stuff. And actually, this isn't about labeling people. This is about just understanding that if I identify as an introvert, that means that actually I need to take care of my mental battery in order to do my best work. Whereas if I identify as an extrovert, I need that social interaction in order to recharge my battery to be able to do my best work. It's why open plan offices work for extroverts and they don't work for introverts, because there's this noise and bustle going on all the time, which some people thrive in. Introverts don't thrive at all because we find it hard to focus. So, there's this concept of flow. And one of the pieces of research I want to do is to understand whether, because my hypothesis is that it's easier for introverts to get into flow, where we get so immersed in something that time just kind of vanishes, and we get so productive into things. And I think that's easier for introverts because we're not so kind of, distracted by everything going on around us.
100%.
But it also means that, we need an environment, a home environment or a work environment that understands that, so that, if I'm working, so at the moment I'm still at home, I've got an office, I haven't gone into it yet, I might go into it later this week. But I've, commandeered one of the back bedrooms and it's my office, so I can shut the door, I can crack on, work here and be completely fine. If I was trying to do this on the dining room table with a busy family around me, it would be a complete nightmare. So it's about understanding the environment that we need in order to flourish as well.
Totally. And so then that, that rolls over into these companies, the managers, the heads, the CEOs, they really need to understand this, because it's certainly that hasn't even entered my brain before speaking to you now. But even just as you're saying it, I'm just thinking, oh my goodness, yeah. And now it just seems so obvious. Why hasn't anybody discussed this? I've discussed this before. Seems crazy now.
It does, and yet if we look around at some of the greatest leaders that we can think of, many of them are introverts. So Barack Obama identifies as an introvert. Now, regardless of whether you agree with his politics or not, there was certainly something about his presence, about his calm, about his demeanor. J.K. Rowling, such a creative brain, identifies as an introvert. Bill Gates, introvert. Many actors, many artists are introverts. Steve Jobs, who founded Apple, introvert. So many great leaders were introverts or are introverts. So it's not as though you have to be an extrovert in order to be a leader. And that's why I'd like more organizations to say, hang on a minute, then let's spot the talent that the introverts, let's help them bring their strengths into this situation, because introverts do have so many great strengths that organizations are missing out on at the moment.
So do you find, I mean, that again, it just seems so obvious now. So do you feel that they would just naturally veer towards certain careers, certain positions? So what would you say if somebody were if somebody is feeling that they're introverted, they've never heard of this, fearful of what career to maybe go for, what would you suggest could be ones to think about?
Well, certainly if I look at some of my clients, I do a lot of work with professional service firms, with, lawyers, accountants, people like that, and a lot of work with STEM industries. So, the technology and IT, those sorts of industries. And there's a lot of introverts that work in those. If you imagine those jobs that actually require you to really focus, whereas a call center probably isn't going to be the right kind of job for an introvert, because there's just so much going on around you. People will often say, well, sales isn't going to be a good job for an introvert. But actually, introverts make some of the best salespeople. And it's because introverts will listen. So one of the skills, one of the strengths we bring to a situation is that we listen really intently, we listen actively, and we listen with our eyes as well as our ears. So we'll notice those little kind of micro expressions. So when somebody's saying something that they don't quite believe, an introvert is likely to pick that up. So because they listen so well, they'll ask great questions, and then rather than selling to somebody, what they're doing is they're enabling the individual to buy. So introverts make great salespeople because they're not kind of yammering all the time about, you need this and these are the benefits and this is this and this is this. They'll ask them about, what is it you're looking for? Talk to me about, how you're going to use this, or what's the purpose and what are you really looking for? And then what they'll do is they'll find solutions that match what the individual wants. So introverts make great salespeople.
Yeah, I can believe that, because it is all about like you say, I've had to change my tactics with certain parts of my jobs because I am a talker, and it is I have to zip it and ask the right questions, so that they actually, rather than me tell them how wonderful this is, they come to the conclusion themselves. Yeah, and initially it's going against my natural instinct, so I can see that would be a natural thing for them.
Exactly. I listened to the interview that you did with the guy who's trained in persuasion and influence and works with Cialdini, and some of what he was saying is exactly right here, is that it's about asking the right question and then enabling the individual to make their own decisions and to almost buy for themselves, really. Yeah, and you're right, and that is where the top salespeople, that's where they come from. And it's been a huge learning curve for me, because my natural impulse is to talk too much, and it is shush. And it's interesting, because if we think about interviews, for instance, job interviews, people are now coached in terms of how to answer those questions in a way that the interviewer wants to hear. So even from that stage, what we're saying to people is, don't show up as who you are, show up as how we think the interviewer wants you to be. But of course, if I master that, if I'm coached well and I manage to fake it during an interview and get the job, I then turn up at the job and the manager goes, "Who's this?" Because it's not who we recruited, because I can't sustain that for any length of time. And if I do try and do that, then I'm going to hit overwhelm and worse really quickly if I try for too long to be something I'm not.
Yeah, sure. So would it, I suppose it would, in that, from that way, it's going to depend on who's in charge, whether they are, what they are, as to what they're going to expect the next load coming in. It's, yeah.
Well, and I also think it's, I think introverts have a role to play here in helping educate people. And I'm part of quite a lot of introvert groups, and all they do in there is moan about, what they can't do. And I talk about it as being introverts hiding inside their introversion. They'll use their introversion as an excuse. And actually, I can do anything I put my mind to. I just need to make sure my mental batteries are suitably charged and that I've got time to recharge afterwards. So, I've emceed events of over 1,000 people. And I love it. I absolutely love it. But what I don't want to be doing is doing all the schmoozing afterwards. What I want to do is, when I come off platform, is go somewhere quiet and just kind of recharge quietly. Then I can go back out and mix with people. But what I don't do is straight down the aisle and signing autographs. That's not how it works for an introvert. So I think it really is about us being able to educate people, being able to talk about our strengths in a really positive way. So for years, people would say to me, not that you'd believe it now, but people would say to me, "Oh, you're so quiet. You don't talk much, do you?" And in the past, I would have apologized for it. I'd have said, "Oh, no, I'm sorry. It's just the way I am." Now I say, "Thank you for noticing. Yeah, one of my strengths is that I'm a really great listener. And that enables me to pick up what's not being said, and then I can summarize or bring things in that, people may have missed. So thanks for noticing." And it's just that subtle shift that makes a world of difference between an introvert turning up thinking that they're less than, or turning up and being prepared to play to their strengths because they know who they are, they found their strengths, and they know how to play to them.
There you go. And that is just all just completely down to perception. So as long as we aware, so I'm quite excited. I've got to go and tell her afterwards, and explain. Actually, I'll just get her to watch this in her own time, because yes, as long as people are then aware, because like you say, if they've been brought up like that, thinking that there is actually something wrong with them, then that is obviously going to have a knock-on effect to how they feel, their mental health and their confidence going into things. Whereas, yes, so what you're doing, you're really inspiring them and just helping them understand that, there's nothing wrong, there's nothing broken, nothing needs to be fixed. You're perfect as you are. It just means that you need this and I need this, and if everybody gets what they need, everybody's going to thrive. And by so for a leader to have both on the team, because I'm sort of, people joke about me, I'm the most unobservant person, really. I think everything's, and I just don't pick up on things. Whereas again, I'll go back to my daughter because it's the only one I can, I totally understand. And I just always go, no, she's just observed. She's an observer. She's just taking it all in.
Absolutely. And to be able to talk about that positively and to enable her to identify her strengths and talk about them positively is going to serve her well when she gets down to interview time and stuff like that. So rather than thinking that she's, she doesn't have what other people have, it's about what do I have and how do I use that really powerfully.
Yeah, there you go. So they really need, so if like going backwards, they need more support even from preschool then, don't they? Do you think this is something that's coming up, or do you still think it's something that's not being spoken about?
I think there are more teachers who are aware. Certainly, I've spoken to a few. My niece is a teacher, and she has this fabulous story of one of their young pupils, really quiet, really well behaved, normally kind of, almost model student. And she got taken into the head's office because she stabbed her pencil in the back of the hand of the boy sat next to her. And they kind of couldn't understand it. And when they asked her what was going on, she said he wouldn't stop talking and I couldn't focus. I couldn't concentrate. And for me, that was a classic case of, introvert needs quiet to do their work. And, often the extroverted kids will be the ones who are larking about and kind of, making jokes and all that sort of stuff. And so what my niece now has is she has a quiet table where kids choose to go. So it's not a punishment, but actually if they want a bit of quiet time, if they want some time to focus, they can choose to take themselves off to the quiet table. Now, isn't that brilliant? Absolutely brilliant.
Yes, because like you say, before it was considered a punishment.
Yeah.
So again, just a simple flip.
Yeah.
In just the descriptive, that's all it is. Same thing.
I know.
But
amazing.
Just turning it around, and they'll actually, she would want to go there.
Yeah, exactly. And it's little things like that I think will make all the difference. And it was actually one of my mentors who said to me, Jo, you need to be talking to educators about this, because if we tackle it at that early age so that they understand, so that children of all ages understand these differences and that there's not right and wrong, there's just different, then it'll stop being a problem in the workplace, because by the time they get to the workplace, they'll know that some people like quiet and some people like noisy, and both is okay, both is fine. So having started working with organizations and individual introverts, I'm now being encouraged to go and talk to educators, because if we get it right at that early age and with parents, it'll make such a difference.
Yeah. Oh, well, just from my own then personal experience, if I'd understood that a long time ago, things would have been a lot easier. I don't think, maybe I wouldn't have worried so much. There isn't, she's okay. I always think, why are you out? I was out all the time at your age. What? There's something wrong. No, there's nothing wrong.
Exactly.
There's nothing wrong. Because that's it. Because all you want them is to be happy. And so then your concern is, if you're not acting a certain way, then that means equals you're not happy. But it ain't necessarily so.
And of course, there are different types of introverts. So it's not as though it's either or. It's not just introvert or extrovert. So I've got a quiz that helps people understand what type of introvert they are. I happen to be an open introvert, which is one of the extroverted introvert types. So when people ask me, how are you, or what are you thinking, I'm likely to tell them. So they better mean it when they ask me. Whereas a classic introvert is quite guarded, quite closed, so they're less likely to share. And, the engaging introverts are the ones who have this magnetic personality. They can hold an audience in the palm of their hand. But again, their mental batteries still drain, if they're in that environment for too long. So all of a sudden, they'll just go offline. So different types of introverts. And once you know your type, then you can really start to appreciate your strengths so that you can play to those strengths really well.
Right. So it's all about empowering.
Absolutely.
Right. So how did you, when did this come about? When did you realise, or when were you made aware? Was this just something that just slowly happened, or was there an event in your life where it came to your attention?
Yeah, it was when I was in my 30s and I was on a women's development programme, a management development programme. I was still working at BT at the time. And we did the Myers-Briggs type indicator, which is the classic questionnaire that tells you whether you're an introvert or an extrovert and kind of other things about your personality. And when I read that, and it's literally like 2 little paragraphs is a descriptor. When I read that, it was like someone could see right inside my soul. How did they know that about me? And in that moment, I thought, oh, so there are other people like me as well. This isn't just me. This isn't me being weird. There isn't a problem with me. There are people like me. And I got so interested in it. I then went and trained as a Myers-Briggs type indicator practitioner so that I'm certified to deliver their products. But even then, because I was in the world of learning and development and training, and all of my colleagues were these big personalities who were like entertainers more than trainers, I thought that I had to be more like them in order to fit in and get on. And it was only when that completely exhausted me that I thought, okay, you know what makes you different. Figure that out for real in terms of what you bring that's different, how you add value in a different way, and really start to play to that. So although I found out that I identify as an introvert in my 30s, it wasn't until my late 50s that I then thought, okay, this is how I can show up as who I really am. And this feels like my life's work now, Karen. This is me until the grave, I think now, is banging this drum, rattling the cages of organizations, helping individual introverts know that they're enough, know that they're okay, and helping them flourish so that they can be authentic, so that they can be powerful as who they are.
Perfect. I mean, I would say pretty much everybody I have spoken to who, ends up being a coach in some way, in whatever modality they've chosen, it has come from some kind of personal experience. Yeah. They flourish through it, and then it would normally be a natural next step, wouldn't it, to then want to share it with others so that they can flourish too.
Exactly. And I love that phrase. I love that phrase, flourishing, as well. Somebody said to me, how did you come up with the name Flourishing Introverts? And I said, I woke up one morning and flourishing was just there. And I went and did a bit of research. And it's a phrase that's used a lot in positive psychology. And I absolutely love it because it's about pursuing kind of an authentic life and really celebrating the wins, even though life has ups and downs. So, flourishing is a choice. It's not a destination. Every day, every moment, I choose whether I'm going to flourish or not. So I can't ever take it for granted. I can't ever sit back on my laurels. If I want to make a difference in this world, which I really do, then I have to choose flourishing all the time. Brilliant.
Absolutely. I mean, I would say what you just said there about, just celebrating every, we've been, and I don't know how it's come about, but we have been conditioned in some way, in general, most people, to punish ourselves for the things we do wrong, or focus, which is, I suppose, the whole coaching arena. We talk about, starting with a gratitude list. The whole thing all links in because we have been so conditioned to we could go throughout a whole day and everything's gone right, and then something's happened, the one thing, and that's the thing you talk about when you go home and you get on the phone to somebody, and it's a habitual pattern that obviously we can break when we're aware of it, but it's quite interesting, isn't it? But it does seem to be natural. So there's some way, some cultural or some kind of conditioning that's gone on that we've been brought up to almost, because it's the way we talk to ourselves, not necessarily to other people, but punish ourselves for something we did wrong. Whereas how many things did you do that come on, let's celebrate every win, but we're brought up to believe that's being, what's the word I'm looking for? But it's not very humble, is it? Well, no, we should celebrate every win, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that, you're hitting on something there with the whole humility, with kind of humbleness. And one of my favorite TED Talks is by Caroline McHugh, and it's called The Art of Being Yourself. And I absolutely love her talk because it really just digs into kind of the inferiority complex, where we think we're not as good as other people, where we're overly humble, the superiority complex, where we think we're way better than everyone else. And what she encourages us to do is find that interiority, to really find who we are and really be that person and not do the comparisonitis, which we know is so damaging anyway.
There you go. And you talk about, you know, being authentic. And I think it is a word that's thrown around and people don't necessarily really understand it. And well, especially with what you've been talking about for the last hour about, because obviously we are not accepting that, because otherwise we would be more accepting of this or that. But I do hope anyway, I hope that things are changing slowly and that people are realizing that, yes, you have got to be just true to you. I mean, I think everybody is sort of teaching that in their own way, that, you know, it's, you grow your own tribe. There's going to be, and this is where what takes away, I think, so much, even the idea of competition, because there is no competition. People will just naturally veer towards people that they're going to resonate with. I mean, how is it? So would you say that, would you resonate more with introverts or more extroverts? Or would it be a complete mix?
Yeah, it'd be a complete mix. You know, one of the things we know about introverts is that typically they have a smaller circle of friends. So whereas extroverts will have so many acquaintances, you know, if an extrovert was celebrating a big birthday, it would be like a party for 250. Whereas an introvert celebrates a big party, it's a dinner party for 6. And you know, I enjoy company of introverts and extroverts, especially when they're educated and they understand. So my extroverted friends will say, hello, Joe's gone offline. Going for a little walk, Joe. I can tell you need to recharge your batteries. So they're mindful of the fact that actually they're just being who they are can be overwhelming for me. So, you know, I love the energy of extroverts. I love that spontaneity that they have that I don't often have. So it's not as though I'll only associate with introverts, but what I do need to do is just watch my own energy and not compromise who I am when I'm with them.
Right. So you don't compromise so that you can fit in. So basically everybody needs to really be aware of this. Yeah. So that you don't push somebody into doing something that they're not going to want to do. They're not going to be happy doing that. They're not going to be happy being in that environment. And so if everybody is aware of everybody else's, well, I just used to just think of it that's just their way.
Yeah.
Which is, isn't it?
Yeah, and it is their way, but now you've got a set of language as to why it's their way and how it's their way.
And I love it. Honestly, I feel like I've had a therapy session. That's helped me personally so much, and I had no idea really, what this whole thing was going to be about. So absolutely fascinating. So for anybody listening, what would be your 3 top tips for somebody if they felt like they've been struggling, or they feel that they're concerned, that they think they're different or there's something's wrong? What would be your 3 top tips to them?
The first thing would be just to either take my quiz to find out what type of introvert you are, or Myers-Briggs or something, or there's online ones. There's so many different ones you could do, but just to kind of clarify that actually there's nothing wrong with me. It's just that this is how I'm wired. So that would be my first thing. The second thing would always be to do a bit of work on yourself to understand your strengths, so that you can play to those more often, so that you can tell people about them, so that, you know, in a job interview, I may even be as forward as saying, you know, I won't be the one who talks the most, but when I do, it'll be something meaningful that I'm contributing, just to kind of pre-frame for people that how I'm going to be is slightly different. And I think the third thing would be to continually make that choice to flourish. So don't hide, don't get discouraged, don't kind of give up, because the world might be biased against us, but doesn't mean that we can't kind of get out there and flourish. So always make that choice to flourish.
Fantastic. Oh, Joanna, thank you so much for your time. That's just been so educational for me. I really cannot explain it. So thank you, guys. I will have all Joanna's details if you want to get in touch with her underneath. And so thank you for listening. I will be back next Monday with Coffee with Karen. Goodbye for now.
Welcome to the Coffee with Karen podcast, a weekly chat show discussing everything from holistic health to current affairs from a mental, physical and spiritual perspective. Get your weekly cup of positivity with a sprinkling of woo-woo.